Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to talk about My Hero Academia once again, chapter 217, and this chapter was actually very interesting in my opinion. What I really enjoyed in this chapter, what I enjoyed the most in this chapter was the whole thing with Monoma and Eri, but I'm not going to talk about that right away. First, I really want to dig into the whole thing with the interactions between Class 1A and Class 1B, because while it didn't really have that much importance or significance to the plot, I still think it is worth talking about because it is something that really shows us that, at the end of the day, Class 1A and Class 1B, they're still students of a school. They're still teenagers, they're still young, and they still need the social aspects of being teenagers. And we really see that flourish in this chapter, how, we see how some people from Class 1B are really asking Class 1A students stuff, and, the other way around. Like, we have Kinoko asking Tokoyami exactly if he has any pictures of Hawks off duty, which is quite interesting when you think about it. Like, it's just the most mundane things, you don't really expect those kind of questions to have any kind of importance. I mean, they don't really. It just kind of shows you that these are students, and that in itself kind of gives it a lot more significance than what you'd really expect, because seeing how My Hero Academia is a series that is set in a school premise, you kind of need that school feeling and that student feeling to it, and My Hero Academia in this chapter definitely showed that, this is definitely not just your straight up battle shonen where the focus is entirely fighting, kind of like Black Clover, where fighting is a lot more prominent than in My Hero Academia. So that was really nice to see how the interactions between Class 1A and Class 1B demonstrated that this is definitely a school manga done right, while still retaining that battle shonen factor. Now at the beginning of the chapter, we see how Bakugo and Deku are obviously practicing because Bakugo wants to see Black Whip being unleashed again so he can defeat that, because he wants to really show that he's the best of the best, typical Bakugo stuff really. It's nothing really that new in terms of his character. It's definitely in character when he's doing this. But what we also saw was a conversation between Bakugo, Deku, and All Might, where they're talking about the quirk and talking about things to do with One for All and All for One, and obviously Bakugo brings up the fact that maybe All for One might have something to do with this, and to me that kind of made sense, because during this arc, before Black Whip was kind of like brought into play, we saw how the story kind of shifted to All for One briefly, where he mentioned his brother and stuff like that. So I'm having some thoughts on the idea that All for One is obviously involved in this whole thing. Now I'm not sure if he can control what happens to Deku's power on any level. I don't think so. I don't really think that would make a lot of sense, mostly because of how One for All operates, how it's a power that can't be forcibly really taken and stuff like that, which kind of makes me feel like no one should be able to really influence it from the outside without the user's permission. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me, so I don't think that's really what's happening, but I guess we're gonna have to see. I mean, it was very vague stuff in this chapter, like they're just speculating really, and Bakugo's just kind of putting it out there. There's nothing conclusive really that says that this is going to be the case, or that All for One is in fact involved at all. I mean, this could be a red herring to put us off as readers, to make us think certain things, but in reality this is not actually what's happening. I mean, All for One might be feeling the presence of One for All when these powers are being used, but I don't really think he can control the power. I don't think that would be fair at all, because that would kind of make All for One even more hacks than he already is if he's ever released from Tartaros, which a lot of people are speculating will happen, that there will be a jailbreak arc and, he's gonna come out. And if that happens, he's gonna have a huge edge against Deku in this case, who's using One for All, because he can influence that power somehow. That wouldn't really sit well with a lot of people, me included, really. I'm gonna be honest. I don't think that would be the best approach to the story, or at least to the progression of Deku's quirk. Another thing that happened in this chapter, of course, was the conversation between Deku and Todoroki. Now, there wasn't really anything huge going down in this conversation. Like, during the spoilers, when I was reading them, there was some talk about Todoroki teaching Deku about dual quirks, which didn't really seem to be the case at all. Like, in this chapter, it was more casual conversation. Deku was more being questioned by Todoroki over anything, and Deku had to kind of explain himself. Now, of course, he can't tell the whole truth to Todoroki, so what he does is come up with a very basic story, like, it just kind of flourished out of nowhere, kind of like how Todoroki has a quirk with two sides to it, Deku just came up with something wild like that on the spot, how it just, the second part of it kind of flourished out of nowhere. And I think, considering he wants to keep the secret of one for all within the little circle that they have, it was a very good move. And because of the fact that Todoroki is, as even Bakugo pointed out, pretty fucking dense, it worked out perfectly well. Now, I would have liked to see some tutoring from Todoroki, but while that would be nice, I kind of see why that's probably not gonna happen, because at the end of the day, Todoroki is his own student. You know, he has to progress himself. He can't just focus all of his energy on someone else like Deku, because Deku has his training to take care of, whereas Todoroki has his own training to take care of. They're both aiming to be the best, you know what I mean? Much like Bakugo is also aiming to be the best. They don't really have time to be tutoring each other about stuff that could make the other person surpass them. It would kind of be against their whole code about becoming the strongest, especially on Todoroki and Bakugo's part, because they really seem to have this really strong rivalry towards Deku, whereas Deku, he doesn't really seem to care as much about that. Like, he would probably be a lot more open to helping out students in his class in order to progress as heroes and in terms of fighting in general. But Bakugo would definitely, I mean, he has done it on some level, but at the same time, he probably wouldn't do something so huge as to really give Deku an edge over him, where Bakugo would have a really hard time catching up to him. I think Todoroki kind of falls under that category as well. He's not as loud and as blunt about it, but I definitely think he's kind of on that end of the spectrum at the end of the day. Now, giving Deku tips, I can kind of see, like seeing Todoroki as give him some pointers. Now that is something that I could definitely see happening. He has nothing really as big as training sessions where he kind of like tells Deku how to call forth his power. Now, even if that were to happen, Deku did of course say that he can't really seem to pull this power out at the moment. Like, he feels like the presence of this power is completely vanished for the time being, which you know, the people who understand this power, they're probably really curious as to why that is, because even Deku seemed really curious as to why this power is just completely vanished. Like, he knows he can't control this power yet, but the fact that he can't even find it, he can't even find the power to bring it out like he could during his match, that is something that really baffles him, I believe. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, I guess, at the moment anyway, because he wasn't really going to be using this until he has gotten a better hang of One for All in general, rather than actually just going straight into these new powers without having the greatest amount of control over his actual power. So, you know, whenever he does unleash a new quirk or the same quirk again, you know, he'd want to have the power to actually be able to withstand that power and being able to make sure that that power obeys him, and rather than the other way around, much like it happened initially during his match against 1B. Okay, so let's talk about the big topic this chapter, at least in my opinion, which was Eri and Monoma, because we got a lot of insight on their quirks both. Let's start with Monoma, because Monoma's quirk is the one that is initially brought up, how he cannot seem to be copying Eri's quirk because it is a accumulation power. That is something we didn't really know about Monoma's quirk. Like 1 or 2 chapters back, we learned that Monoma wasn't able to copy Deku's power because it was considered a dud. And that is quite interesting, because we know you could copy the actual power, like you could activate One for All as a quirk, but the actual power that comes with it is nowhere to be found. So comparing that to Eri's power, we can assume that there is some kind of energy that has to be stored in her rewind quirk in order for that power to be unleashed, which we didn't know before. We did not know that that was something that occurred within the rewind quirk. So that was really good to see how through Monoma's quirk being explained on a more base level, we actually learned more about Eri's rewind quirk as well, which kind of begs the question, you know, how Eri's quirk is going to play a part in the future, because I feel like these powers aren't, especially Eri's power, isn't really being explained to this level if it's not to be used at some point in the future, especially given how they're trying to return Mirio's quirk to him through the rewind power, but Eri isn't really in a position where she can actually help Mirio right now, which is why they're trying to get Monoma to activate his power for her, which didn't really work either. So I really wonder exactly if that is going to be something that is gonna return to the story. Obviously not with Monoma at all, because he was a bust effectively, okay? His quirk simply wasn't compatible with what they wanted to accomplish. So we're gonna go back to where we were really, with Eri growing as a character probably throughout the years maybe, and eventually Mirio might be getting his quirk back, you know, whenever Eri feels ready to actually start training with her quirk and stuff like that. Now her quirk is very dangerous, so training with her quirk just in general is quite the task when you think about it. Like, yes, a wrong move and you can kill someone. So I mean, I guess the idea of using it on not humans is a start, but at the end of the day, you know, you're gonna get PETA after you, endure, that's going to cause a lot of issues. Anyway, that's gonna have to do for this review, so I hope you liked it. I would like to know what you thought about this chapter down in the comments below, and as always, if you did, be sure to Detroit smash that like button if you enjoyed, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. This has been Chaotic Plus, and I'll see you next time.